Hey, Keto Freaks. In case you haven't heard, Richard Morris and I are turning the entire town of New London, Connecticut ketogenic in July 2017. Keto Fest isn't a conference. Conferences are for professionals. Festivals are for people. We will have some great speakers, yes, but also a pig roast, music, movies, cooking lessons, fitness lessons, bike tours, walking tours, and a whole lot of camaraderie among fellow Ketonians. Richard and I will both be there, as will many of our podcast guests and Facebook group admins. There's so much going on, I don't have time to tell you here. So go to ketofest.com and add your name to the mailing list so you'll know where to go and when in order to get your tickets. Keto Fest, real keto for real people. Welcome back to Two Keto Dudes. This is Carl Franklin from Connecticut in the United States. And in February 2016, I put myself on a ketogenic diet to take control of my metabolism. In just 2.5 months, I managed to reverse all my markers of type 2 diabetes with diet alone. As of now, I'm 72 pounds lighter with no signs of diabetes or heart disease.
Hi, I'm Richard Morris in Canberra, Australia, and I've been on a ketogenic diet for over 2 years. And when I started, I was very sick with complications from type 2 diabetes. Within 6 months of starting a ketogenic diet, all of my biomarkers of disease had disappeared. I've also lost around 70 pounds, and I've completely turned my health around.
And this show is a document of my progress through ketosis and Richard's experience thriving for years in nutritional ketosis.
Yeah.
And hopefully that might help a few people who are curious about this kind of dietary hacking.
Yeah, we're not doctors. We don't want to give anyone any medical advice, but we are keen to share our own experiences. We're actually both software developers, so we're not afraid of a few technical details, are we, Carl?
Nah.
But we have done some research into our own deranged metabolisms and the science behind that, and we hope to share some of that research. Where possible, we intend to put links in the show notes to cite the research supporting any claims that we make.
Right, and you'll probably work out pretty quickly that we're both foodies.
Yep, we sure are.
We love to cook and we love to eat. So every episode, we both share a keto recipe that cannot be ignored.
They sure can't.
So let's start podcast episode 34, Inspiration. So, Richard, do we have any corrections or apologies from last week?
Yeah, Carl. Last week was the protein controversy. You probably remember it. And I referred to a minimum requirement of 51 grams of glucose being required to run the brain. The actual figure should be 50 grams. I made a rounding error in the spreadsheet that I was working from during the show. But the math on our post is all double-checked and hopefully free of rounding errors. 50 grams of glucose from the glycerol released by burning 500 grams of fat, which requires that Angus Barbieri ask his body to deliver 3,850 kilocalories of energy and have at least 123.23 pounds of body fat on him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Angus Barbieri, the guy who fasted for 382 days.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. So let's recap what a ketogenic diet is. Ketogenic diet is actually any diet that puts you in a state of nutritional ketosis.
Sure.
Where you're burning fat and you are producing ketones.
Yep.
And so what we adhere to still is Volek and Finney's recommendation, which is 20 grams or less of carbs a day, which is usually from incidentals like green leafy vegetables and non-starchy vegetables and maybe some nuts.
And cheese has got a few carbs in it. Very small amount.
Exactly. And then protein scales with how much lean body mass you have.
That's right.
We use 1 gram to 1.5 grams per kilo of lean body mass.
Sure.
Which is taken from Finney and Volek's Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living. And then fat to satiety.
Right.
What does that mean? Well, if you're hungry, you eat more fat.
Yeah. And pretty much we're going to get all of our energy from either body fat or fat that we eat.
And do you want to repeat your keto haiku? Because I thought that was brilliant.
Yes, my haiku. So that is, when hungry, you eat. Mostly fat with some protein. Stop when you are full.
That's so great.
So I actually got slammed by Ishay on that, because apparently to be a proper Japanese haiku, I need to mention something from nature or a season or something in that regard for it to be an official haiku.
Oh, okay. So how did you do this week, Richard?
Yeah, I did well. I finished my fast on my birthday, on my 51st birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. And I did a 5-day fast, and I intended on the third day to ride 100K. But I went out and it was raining, but I still went out regardless. And then I had a puncture, so I repaired the puncture and I stayed out regardless. And I ended up having 3 punctures, and I called it quits because I'd run out of inner tubes and run out of puncture repair kits. So I ended up doing about 35K. That was on Sunday. And then on Monday, I went out again and did another 70K. And that day, I'd repaired all my punctures, and I rode at one point on the highway here, and I had my first ever blowout puncture, which is where, an entire 4 or 5 inch seam in the tube rips just very quickly. So it sounds like a gunshot going off when you're riding along. It's very scary.
Yeah.
And this was on the highway, but so I repaired that and I kept on riding. So and then the following day on my birthday, I did another 30K. So and this is all fasted, mind you, 5 days fasted. So it's remarkable how much energy somebody with a fair amount of body fat can draw out of their body.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and then on Wednesday we went out to Julie's club, the Press Club, the National Press Club of Australia, and we had a meal which was normally if I have to go out, I have to sort of have a few carbs because I'm going to a restaurant, but I decided what I would do this time is I'd try really hard to eat at a fancy restaurant and be totally keto.
Awesome.
I've got the meals that Julie and I both had at the Press Club on our blog, and Julie had a barramundi ceviche, which is it's a raw fish. It's a fish cooked in acid.
Yep.
And for my appetizer, I had a sashimi of yellowfin tuna.
Nice.
Which, again, is very keto, yeah. And then for our mains, we had espresso-infused pork belly.
Wow.
With a textures of cauliflower. And it was cauliflower veloute and cauliflower freeze-dried florets, and it was very fancy. So, but that was all totally keto. So, as I say, I've got them up on our blog post, and you can go have a look at those and see it really is possible to eat keto at a very fine dining restaurant.
That's great. Hey, how was the reaction to last week's show, the protein controversy?
Yeah, some of the things I said were a little bit controversial, and I was hoping to get more of a reaction than I ended up getting. So far, I've only got one response by a guy named Bocky Dog, who asserted that it would be ludicrous to imagine that a few micrograms of aspartate would drop ketosis. I'm going to do the experiment. Next time I do a fast, I'm going to do some exercise to make my body produce ketones, and then I'm going to eat something like egg whites, a large amount of egg whites, which have a fair amount of aspartate in them, and see what that does to my ketone production. So I'll do the experiment and I'll find out.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's all for me this week. Carl, how was your week?
Oh, man, I'm having a great week. I'm in Atlanta this week
Nice.
for the Microsoft Ignite conference.
Yeah.
And I went on the Facebook group and said, hey, I'm in Atlanta. Does anybody want to have a meetup? And that's MEAT.
Yep.
And so we did. I got about 5 or 6 friends in the local area that are on the Facebook group that came down, and we went to a Brazilian steakhouse where they keep bringing meat until you say no more.
Yeah.
Nice. It was wonderful. First thing I did when I got here, which might be germane to the show, we'll ask Kevin about this, but when I got here, they put me up in a Hyatt that has, it's a suite, so it has a kitchenette.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, there's no oven, of course, but there's a microwave, there's a fridge, and there's a countertop and a sink. And so what I did, the first thing, I went to Kroger, which is the local grocery store here in Atlanta, if anyone's ever seen Good Eats, right?
Yep.
I don't know this, but I actually may have gone to Alton Brown's Kroger because I'm in Marietta.
Wow.
And I'm not sure, though. I'm not sure. Just a remote possibility. Anyway, so I brought some coconut oil with me, so I didn't need that. But I did get a stick blender, which I did not bring with me because I don't have one.
I had to buy one.
I had to buy one, but it was $20. No
Okay.
problem. And it comes with a little container that you can use to blend stuff in.
Yeah. And you'll get lots of use out of it.
Yeah. And I also got stuff for a new non-alcoholic drink that I half invented with the bartender at Daddy Jack's, Corey.
Nice.
And I call it the Carl Franklin.
Why not?
Yeah, why not? It's pretty simple, really. You take some seltzer water, otherwise known as soda water, otherwise known as club soda.
Sure.
It's just fizzy water with no flavor, no calories. And you add to it some fresh lime juice. And when I'm home, I throw in a little apple cider vinegar.
Nice, yeah.
Which I also bought at Kroger, by the way.
Yeah.
And some orange or citrus bitters, just a few squirts of that, and some salt.
Nice. So it's like it's almost margarita-ish.
It's very margarita-ish, and if you want to, you can add some alcohol to it. But
Sure.
I quit drinking, so this is really good for me. And somebody brought up in the forum, nothing worse than a reformed drinker. Right?
Yeah, don't get all annoying on us.
Yeah, I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not preachy.
No, I won't let you be that guy.
No way, man. No way. I appreciate good bourbons and scotches. They're wonderful manna from the gods, but I just want to be nicer to my liver.
You don't need them in your liver right now. Yeah. Fair enough.
50 ways to love my liver. So I decided after a couple of days of keto coffee every morning and only eating one meal, I would check my blood sugar and my ketones. My ketones yesterday were 1.3. Nice.
Yeah, very nice.
And my blood sugar was 85.
That's not bad either. That's pretty good.
So I would say I'm having a great time. I didn't bring a scale, so I don't know, but
who cares?
I'll let you know next week. Who cares? Yeah.
Well, the good thing is that you're in these conferences, these software conferences are carb fests.
Right.
So if you can manage to stay low carb in that kind of environment, then you're winning.
I chalk that up to having keto coffee every morning.
Yeah.
I just blend a tablespoon of coconut oil and a shake of cinnamon into a regular cup of coffee, which I do half decaf just because I like coffee and I want to drink more of it.
Yeah.
So, and that just kept me on the straight and narrow the whole time. I really didn't feel like I needed to. I never was tempted by anything.
That's awesome. Well done.
So one more thing I want to mention, and I mentioned this in last week's show, that I've decided to hold the first ever, for me, keto retreat.
Yeah.
This is going to be the second week of January. I'm going to rent a house in Las Vegas, and it's got a great kitchen. It's got room for everybody to sleep in. It's a big house. There's a pool and a spa and a massage chair, and I'm going to take 10 people. Now,
this is not for keto experts, is it? This is really for newbies in their first week.
You got it. The first week is the hardest, so it's really for those people who want to take the plunge, but they need a commitment device. They need something that is going to keep them on the path for a week.
Yeah.
And that's why we go away, go away. And, I looked up some keto retreats or health retreats, and they have cruises and stuff. And there are all sorts of these ones down in the Caribbean and, in these lavish places with, where you get pampered and all that stuff. And that's not reality, So I wanted to do something where we were a little bit more in the real world. We're in a kitchen, we're cooking together, and actually going out to restaurants together.
And doing what Julie and I did the other day, which is finding a restaurant and making keto from what they have on their menu.
Exactly. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to a regular restaurant, just a family restaurant. And then on the last day, we'll go to Texas de Brazil, which is another one of these Brazilian steakhouses where the gauchos bring steak and meat and more meat until you say no. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's it. Well, we do have a special guest today, but before we get to Kevin, it's time for
Mail!
We're justified and we don't need
I love doing mail. So Jason says, I just did the math, which is apropos considering our last week's podcast was quite math heavy.
Right.
And Jason says, I just did the math. 2,000 calories of ribeye costs $2.39 less than 2,000 calories of Cashy Go lean crunch bars.
This portion of Two Keto Dudes brought to you by Kashi Go Lean Crunch Bars.
Not anymore, it isn't. I think it's brought to you by 2,000 calories of ribeye.
Yeah, right. Greg said, many times I have come on this group. Obviously, this is from the Facebook group.
Yep.
And I have been inspired and amazed at people's progress.
Yeah.
Today, I have my own success to celebrate. I'm about halfway to my weight goal. I've lost over 55 pounds, but my big non-scale victory came today when my cardiologist's office called me. The girl said that she was holding the results of Monday's blood work, and the doctor had written a note that said, quote, call him and let him know that he is no longer a diabetic, end quote.
Booyah!
Booyah! She said that my new A1C is 5.9.
Nice.
And said that the doctor also wrote, keep doing this diet plan.
Well done.
Yeah, well done. She also let me know that both lines had big exclamation points. What an awesome call to get. I am more than impressed and more than excited with this way of eating and how it restores good health.
That is outstanding.
Yeah.
So we've got another one from John who says, I've heard stories on this page and others about cheating on the diet. Some even from our brave and fearless leaders about an evening at a wedding, for example, where caution was thrown to the wind and there were, quote unquote, indulgences.
Indulgences.
I think that was actually me. Of course, folks jump right back on the wagon and get to ketoing again. All eventually evens out and everybody is fine.
Yeah.
But what I'm wondering is if I know that a time is coming up where on that day I will indulge in the full meal that is served and not pass on things, should I prepare for it to lessen the shock to my system? For example, insulin spike, gut's ability to digest food that I have not eaten since going keto, etc. I've read blogs, opinion pieces that seem to go both ways on this. Would the preparation period just add to the damage that will be done on the day in question? Would it be best to just have a good time and get right back at it later on? I'm not looking for permission or to give anybody permission for anything. I own my decisions. I'm looking to mitigate damage and any guidance or experience that you may have.
Yeah.
So I guess my response to that is what you can do is you can deplete your glycogen before the event so that you've got somewhere to put any glucose that you eat. So you could say go for a run for 2 hours beforehand to deplete all of the glucose that you've stored in your muscles. And when you eat carbohydrates, it's got somewhere immediately to go that isn't going to raise your glucose in your blood, and it's not going to be converted into instant fat. So so that's one idea, is to go for a run, and then the day afterwards you will have hopefully that any carbs that you eat will go straight into your muscle storage, glycogen, and then the next day go for a run just to empty that all out again. And that's probably going to be the best strategy for coping with it. As far as looking after your gut and making sure that your gut's going to be able to deal with it, it's very difficult to because your gut's not used to it, and you really can't sort of, if you spend a week sort of gradually adding carbohydrate to your gut, that's a lot of glucose that you got to deal with. So, if you're going to be following the glycogen depletion strategy, then do you really want to spend the whole week going for 4 hours of running every day? I probably wouldn't. So I would just do that, and then just realize it's going to be heavy on your gut. It's going to be like a brick in your gut. I know when I had that accident, I won't ever do that again because I had such horrible knee pain that I could barely sleep afterwards. So that's my. I probably won't do that again, and I'll go out of my way to make sure that the food that I eat doesn't have carbs.
Yeah, and these kinds of posts are tricky because some people see it as a prescription for how to cheat.
Yeah, true.
And while I hate to get in people's brains and think for them. And that's really not what we try to do here. We try to share our experiences. And I think that everybody cheats at least once on this diet because we want to know what happens, and we want to know, we don't believe it. We don't believe it unless we experience it, typically. Right. So I have done it a few times. Richard's done it a few times. And I do think it's important to, while we're reluctant to give you any tips for cheating, because that's not what we're about.
No.
While I think it's good that we tell you what our experiences are, and my experiences are this. Every time I've not just a cheat day, but a cheat meal, right? Every time I've done one meal, it's taken me 5 to 7 days to get back to where I was weight-wise. But in the beginning, I would have those telltale signs of a glucose metabolism, which is, stiff legs. As you said, you had knee pain, just feeling terrible. I felt awful. But after I became fat adapted, I still gained weight, but I didn't have those symptoms anymore. So it wasn't so hard on the way I feel, but it definitely punished me at the scale. And it still took a week to get back to where I was. And yes, it was very easy to get right back on the horse the second and third times. That first time was really difficult. It was really, really difficult. So Ron Rosedale says that, and I can't remember the quote exactly, but in the end, your longevity is determined by how much fat you burn versus how much sugar you burn.
Right.
So if you think of it that way, as few cheat meals as possible is definitely recommended. Yeah. And you want to be fat adapted before you even think about it. And I wouldn't think about it. I would engage the art of distraction. And when you're feeling emotional, what I do is I overindulge in keto foods. And let's face it, there are so many great keto foods. Make yourself a fathead pizza.
Yeah, exactly. If as Malcolm Grove says, if you're going to cheat, eat keto. Just eat some really delicious keto, high calorie keto.
Go get a bag or a bottle of macadamia nuts.
Oh yeah.
So people are going to cheat to see what happens. We can't stop you from cheating. We don't want posts that encourage cheating or any of that kind of stuff, but yet it's going to happen. So sometimes I think, for example, a child learns a lot from sticking their fingers on a hot stove. What are you going to do? Yeah. Just get back on the horse. That's what we prescribe.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, and that brings us to our guest today. Kevin Scharmen is here, and I'm going to let him introduce himself. Kevin, you're in a truck somewhere on the side of the road, right?
Oh, that's right. I'm in Joplin, Missouri.
Joplin, Missouri. That's where the tornadoes touched down.
Yep, that's right.
4 or 5 years ago.
Yes, I think it was longer than that, but yes, they had I was in the military back then, and my oldest son was still at the house, and we were able to donate some food items here. But it's come a long way. It's a nice place here.
So, Kevin, you have so many stories. Let's start with your story of your military service and what happened and what led you to this point of ketosis.
Sure. Oh, and thanks for the opportunity to potentially embarrass myself in front of 70,000 listeners.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You're more than welcome.
We're experts at it.
All right. Well, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version, but I'm about you guys' age. I just hit the big 49 back in March and approaching 50, and joined the Army I joined the Army in 1985. So I was going to retire in 2005, but I liked it so much I just kind of hung around for another 5 years. Yeah. Okay. So deployed real world deployments 5, 3 in a combat zone, Desert Storm, and Afghanistan once, and Iraq again.
Well, before we go any further, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you for your support. And there's my computer overlord. Sorry.
That's all
right. Deployed to Haiti, and also during Hurricane Katrina down in New Orleans. So some, not all of it's combat. It's not all action and adrenaline.
Right.
But yeah, so I've always had a weight problem ever since I joined the military. As a matter of fact, I was at my peak in physical performance when I was 18.
Sure.
But I never had that belly back in the day when I was growing up. I went to basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia, in the hottest part of the year, June, July, August, September, and the drill sergeants encourage you to eat everything on your plate. unless you want some punitive punishment there.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So, and the military adopts, and as far as I know, they still do a calories in, calories out approach, and that's what was accepted. So,
Right.
I've always had. I'm just a medium-sized guy, 5'8", 5'8.5" if I stand up really straight. And they do what they call a tape test, and that's just a body BMI measurement, measuring your neck and around your navel. And I've always failed, even though I could pass the PT test. I was always considered overweight. So that's when it started, back early. And so fast forward a few years, I mean, I was still in good shape. I could still, pass the tape test, the body fat measurements, but I was always considered over for my age, for my height. I eventually got down to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. That's home of the 82nd. Ooh.
Yeah.
They specialize in real world deployments. They have to be anywhere on the planet within 18 hours, and we catch a ride with the Air Force.
Wow.
And I was 27 at the time, and this was my first jump with the division. I had just gone to airborne school, and what happened was that a air traffic controller cleared 2 aircraft on the same runway at the same time while we were doing our pre-jump training. So whether you jump 5 times or 55 times, you still have to go through, actions in the aircraft. It's automatic, so you don't even have to think about it.
Right.
And one of the guys that was in the mock doors happened to look up and saw the crash as it was happening and yelled, "Crash, crash, crash." I turned around, saw a spinning fuselage heading my direction, and we just all picked a direction and took off. A few seconds later, I was on fire.
Oh, man.
Well, at that particular point, Dick Van Dyke did not occur to me. Hey, stop, drop, and roll,
Yeah.
Well, when I finally ran a distance away, I did. It's sandy soil there, so I got down. I was able to put myself out. At least my back was out, but my legs were bent. And so I got up and started running out of the area, and my pants legs were still on fire. I did not realize. And this dude intercepted me. He was like, "Hey, you're still on fire!" He grabbed me to the ground, threw me to the ground, started ripping my clothes off. I was like, "Wait, I just met you." Yeah, that's my joke. I try to put the fun in funeral because there's enough misery in our lives, where you can't, you got to make fun of some, of some things, and if not yourself, you shouldn't make fun of others. But he put me out, and I posted that story, I think, on the 2 Keto thread, just for anyone who's interested. And because I met that guy, that's another story, but I met that guy years later and was able to thank him.
Yeah.
So I got up, I walked around, it was misery everywhere. Oppressive heat, things on fire. And eventually I just, I looked at my hands, I burned the back of my hands. And I was like, oh, this doesn't look too good.
Yeah.
And then I felt the back of my head, and this doesn't feel too good. But it was painful, obviously. And but I didn't feel like I was dying. I was in a lot of pain. I was just in a lot of pain. I didn't inhale any hot gas. So, I wasn't, I did not feel like I was, going to see Elizabeth.
Yeah. And you made a full recovery?
Yes. Well, I got something from the VA when I finally retired because I have to be careful when it comes to heat sources, and because my hands are burned, so is my back. So if I'm working on a stove, you can use the backs of my hands as coasters for anything hot or cold.
Yeah.
It won't be a few seconds before I feel the temperature difference. And so I have to be careful with that. The skin grafts came from my thighs, were put on my hands, and they are susceptible to injury. So I just got to be careful. But I did get back on the horse to answer your question, because I was able to recover. They had shipped me to Fort Sam Houston, which is Brooke Army Medical Center. That's the burn center there, and they now, I think they renamed it San Antonio Military Medical Center. And I did all recovery there. And the rule of thumb was for a healthy individual, a percentage a day. So I was burned 34%. I was in the hospital 30 days. And then they sent me back to Fort Bragg to do occupational and physical therapy and do some scar revision surgeries. I had some webbing on my hands, and some thick scarring on the right side of my face. The only thing I'm missing is a little bit of my ear.
Oh.
And everything else works, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, that's everyone does the man check when.
Of course.
But the takeaways from this is that I was a 27-year-old guy surrounded by a bunch of young guys and old guys who did not realize that they only had, that this would be their last day on Earth. So
it's terrible.
I mean, there's lots of what ifs,
Right.
And we lost 24 people total in that accident, and 90 casualties. I want to say, I might be off on the numbers. It was so long ago. The bulk of us got shipped to to SAMC and got our recovery there.
So I have a question, because I don't get to talk to burn survivors very often. Mm-hmm. Do you still have pain?
I do not. No. Once in a while, I'll have an itch, a phantom itch, I guess you could call, on some of the edges of my scar tissue. Yeah. But I don't have any phantom pain. But I'm only speaking for myself, because when I became a liaison down there, because of my burn experience towards the end of my career, I put off retirement because an opening came down for a representative of the 82nd to be the liaison between family members, patients, administration staff, any VIPs that came down. I mean, it was a good HR job, but I learned a lot, and I know how lucky I was.
Yeah. What a harrowing tale.
Yeah, but you know what? As soon as I got done with when I got discharged from the hospital, I was obviously messed up, and because I was wearing compression garments to smooth out the scarring, I was red-faced. I was obviously messed up, but you make it an object lesson. I share the story freely with everybody, because there's no sense in keeping it in. I can't say I have PTSD as a result. I mean, I'm well aware of planes now. I've never used to be.
Right.
But a child, they are the most honest people. They'll come up and they'll say, "Hey, what happened to you?" And I'll make it an object lesson. I say, "Don't play with fire."
Yeah. Well, and it's just a lesson in not being able to control everything in your life. And sometimes things happen that nobody asks for, and they just happen to you. And that's just it's the luck of the draw some ways.
Yes. Oh, sure. The doctors tried to war game it, like, where were you standing to the best of your knowledge? Was your uniform starched? Did you run this way or that way? Yeah. And there was no rhyme or reason. It was completely random as what they can determine. Yeah. But I was able to make lemonade out of lemons in life, and I'm not the only one. There's quite a few guys who turned their life around and were definitely injured worse than I was. I have one of the rare opportunity to say, "Hey, I knew that guy before he was famous." Type of thing. J.R. Martinez was he made his injuries and was able to develop it into an acting career. You saw him on Dancing with the Stars. Before he was famous, he was a motivational speaker. And one of my fellow soldiers, Bobby Henline, he turned his injuries into a comedian act. You can look these guys up. Yeah. One other guy that sticks is Shiloh Harris. He turned his into a book, and so these guys injured much worse than I was. But holy crap, they have they set the example on how to live. Yeah.
Yeah, it's impressive that you can come back from something like that, seeing a lot of people killed in front of you. I mean, friends, and spending the last day with a whole group of people is it's a remarkable thing to come back from that mentally and not have PTSD. I mean, that's just spectacular. I went through not nearly as traumatic an experience, but September 11, I was working on Wall Street at the time, and I was 100 meters away from the buildings when they came down. And I still have, sometimes, the sound of hail on a tin roof affects me because it sounds like people jumping, and that it's surprising, for me. Most times I never think about it, but then it's just some little trigger that just happens and it just sets you off, and it's remarkable to have come away from that, without too much PTSD is spectacular, and it speaks to your mental agility, the ability to think your way through the whole process. So well done.
Thank you. I try to override the emotion with logic. So
yes.
I guess you could say if you want to say I have a slight form of PTSD, I never used to be a white knuckle flyer, but once I got done with all the treatment, I deployed in aircraft overseas. I mean, I wish they would have allowed us a little alcohol for that, so I can be unconscious for it, because that's the one thing I'm thinking of. It wasn't in the airplane when it crashed. I'm thinking I'm in a big container full of fuel, and there's no coming back from it at this height and stuff like that. And it was miserable, but I got over it, and I don't fly when I don't have to, but I still get on that horse. So
right. So how did you get to keto?
Well, I started out with Rob Wolf's book. I was like, I've always been interested. I've always been geeky and stuff like that, mostly with the history. And the history being the ancestral health angle and stuff like that. I mean, I've always been interested in diet because of my problems with the military and keeping within the standards. After I got injured, I initially lost weight, and because the skin was just pumping out lots of energy because it was trying to heal itself, and it was energy intensive. I got down to, I think, 170 at one point, and then I kind of ballooned up. But they felt sorry for me because I was injured, and I was not within the standards. Plus, I could not work out and things like that. But eventually, after my initial scar revision surgeries, and I was cleared to jump again. It was so funny because my first sergeant, he's the senior enlisted in the company. I asked him, "Hey, can I jump?" And he's like, "Well, get him a letter from your doctor, and if he says it's okay, then it's okay." So I talked to my doctor. I had been sent back to Fort Bragg, and my doctor, I talked to him on the phone. He said, "Hey, do you think I could jump again?" And he's like, "I don't know. Can you jump again?" And I said, "Yes, I'll send you a letter." That was it. That was it.
That'll be $1,000, please.
Yeah, that was when the military had plastic surgeons, well, quote unquote plastic surgeons, but he was a good guy. Doc Cheney's his name. So I don't know if he's listening, but I think he's in your neck of the woods there, Carl. Okay. So I got done. I got back into shape, and was still battling the bulge. I knew that the pancreas controlled blood sugars, but I did not know how that all worked out. I thought I was in the calories in, calories out. Obviously, if you burn more than you take in, you're going to lose weight.
Right.
And I did have some success, but it wasn't easy. So what happened was, I'm going to fast forward. I got out of the military, and then I little less active. And one of the problems with being in the military is a lot of the physical ailments you have for abuse, over the next 20 years. This is just a non-scientific survey of mine, observational, is that a lot of soldiers will, as soon as they get out, they age really fast, or they have the same problems everybody else does. In addition to something that's like military specific, like your knees or your hips or something, that's a hard thing to overcome, especially if you've been in the airborne for a long time, because we do hit hard. And I was fortunate. I only had one knee injury, and so I had no excuse not to run. I survived the airborne with my knees intact, and so I think I really took ancestral health seriously during my time outside the military. I retired in 2010, and then spent 3 years just doing an office job. And then when I finally got a handle on it, I mean, I was still into the calories in, calories out. So I started running the stairs and that sort of thing. So that's the physical part of it. I have a son. He's my 15-year-old, and he had a lot of problems just growing up. A lot of food issues initially, allergic to a lot of stuff, and having bad gas or not gas, I'm sorry, but intestinal problems. And then and this is before we even knew that that, hey, maybe it's what you eat. But he was having some behavioral problems, and around 8 years old, and he has a slight speech impediment, so he's hard to understand, especially at 8 years old or 7 years old. He couldn't articulate what was going through his mind, and I mean, you could just see it. He has all of these problems, and then it was someone associated some behavioral health with the food that children eat.
Yeah.
And so we got a behavioral health referral from the military system, and we went to this one place locally in San Antonio, and we actually just wanted a child psychologist, and trying to determine what techniques we can use so he can deal with it.
Right.
And she's like, well, we prescribe medications here. And I was like, well, we don't want medications. And basically she said, well, why are you here? And so we backtracked. That was our one and only visit. I think we maybe went twice, but that was it. They wanted to medicate Will's behavior into remission, and that was not okay with us. Yes, and so what we did was we put him on a real food diet. At this point, it was still paleo, but Will's behavior just normalized. He was able to cope. I mean, we're talking like rapid recovery. He is an awesome young man right now. He's 15, and he's also the one. Hey, you want to eat this? Is it paleo? He's like, because he saw the benefits in himself. And okay, fast forward a couple years. My wife, and this is 2016, I guess, was the 2015 and 2016 was where I actually heard about keto. And I was listening to Rob Wolf's podcast, and he was talking to somebody else, and he'd mentioned ketosis this and ketosis that. I just kind of blew it off and said, oh, okay, I'll look it up later, And but then I come across other podcasts and explained it all, and I was like, wow, okay, well, let's give it a shot. But let's see, what happened is that my wife was having some skin conditions that were mentioned in other geeky podcasts, that that it could be an autoimmune condition of some kind. Wow. And I was like, okay, well, and I had seen Dr. Walls's TEDx talk, and I was like, holy crap. I mean, she has an autoimmune disease, and she was able to tweak her food intake to herself. And I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. So I bought my wife the Walls protocol and told her to, have at it. By this time I was out and about, driving, and it wasn't like a few weeks later, she had gotten an examination, and the doctors were concerned with her liver enzymes.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. So she got a retest, and they're like, okay, you have a fatty liver.
Ouch.
Wow.
Total coincidence. I gave her the Walls protocol, and then suddenly she has a non-alcoholic fatty liver. And so now I'm looking through all the literature. What is exactly a non-alcoholic fatty liver? Because I've heard it on you guys' podcast and everybody else that it's going to be the new upcoming condition. It's going to be the new normal here shortly. Mm-hmm. And so she volunteered to get biopsies done and not experimental drugs, but a known drug to they've had some success in it. And I got my wife's permission to talk about this.
Okay, good.
Okay. And so there was a few months later, she got another biopsy done, and a different doctor who is top in his field. However, he was kind of new at it, and he calls her up or she visits, and the doctor says, you have stage 4 cirrhosis.
Wow.
There's a happy ending to the story. So the cirrhosis diagnosis was completely incorrect.
Oh, no.
And yes.
And good.
Yes, completely incorrect. Yes. She was a little bit angry with the doc, and I told her, hey, look at the bright side. You didn't get a good, clean bill of health just to find out you only had 2 weeks to live.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a human error, but it wasn't not in my opinion, a negligent human error, because he was a new doc. He is top in his field. and no one got hurt. And actually, it was good news. So let's keep them on on a trial basis. No,
Yeah.
no, they have wonderful doctors there at the San Antonio Military Medical Center, and so once it was all corrected, her current diagnosis was stage. They call it a stage 2 fatty liver, and with no cirrhosis.
Wow.
And so the results of her her latest biopsy was that her enzyme numbers were trending towards the good territory, and this was only a few months into her diet.
And she primarily did a paleo thing like your son did, or did she go full keto, or what?
I would say she's more keto. She's not measuring her macros. She's getting probably the bulk of her energy from fats, but just she has a problem digesting fat, so we're tinkering with that.
Yeah.
A lot of the leafy greens, and a moderate amount of protein. So she and we as soon as we get back, we lack the tools, the measuring tools to determine whether or not we are in ketosis. So when she got on the Walls protocol, I mean, we're a team. She and I are a team. We've been married for 20 some odd years. So
Great.
So I did it because there was some concern about my weight and my becoming obese while out on the road, because it is a problem, because it's long hours and you get bored, and there's a lot of hyper palatable foods out there like donuts and Krispy Kremes. Like
Sure.
Yeah.
and so that is sort of my motivation. It is my motivation to stay with her on this journey until we can get her liver completely healed, and plus she is insulin resistant. I was blessed myself because her numbers are going the right way, and she actually said I was in denial, because as soon as she got the cirrhosis diagnosis, I'm like, you know what, we're going to try to fix what liver she had left. That was my goal.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, she was under the impression there's no fixing this, and I'm like, well, we're going to try, because I'm not going to count on a transplant,
So this is really fascinating. You started with your son, had
Mm-hmm.
really good results with paleo, and then your wife had really good results cutting the carbs and essentially being ketogenic, and then you tried it.
Yes.
And so you're doing keto on the road.
Yes, I am.
And that must have its own challenges, as you're saying, with all these Krispy Kremes and things out there. How on earth do you do it?
Well, I've been very blessed as far as not being sensitive to any food. I've never been diagnosed with insulin anything. I've always had normal. I mean, if I eat too much, I get overweight, and if I don't exercise enough, I'll have a slightly higher blood pressure. I'm treating myself as if I were a type 2 diabetic.
Okay.
Even though I'm not.
Yeah.
And I try to eat to live and not live to eat. And but I'm changing that, because my wife, I'm not a foodie, but my wife is. And so the recipes that you guys put at the end of your podcast are very helpful or will be very helpful when I'm finally back home. But going into the only time I find myself weak is if I'm hungry or I'm emotional, I'm menstruating or something.
Yeah. What kinds of foods do you bring with you, and how can you prepare them?
Well, I'm a convenience kind of guy. There's another driver that's actually on the podcast, and he's more of a preparer, because there's plenty of times to prepare, but I'm a lazy guy, and so I was an early adopter for myself of the chicharrones, the fried pig skins, because there's only two. Because I lack the measuring tools on the road.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I started out basic. Okay, so I'm going to just eat enough protein to satisfy my cravings, because I crave. I was going to listen to my body is what I was going to do. I was starting out blind, and I was going to push as much fat as I can take it, And then once I got to that point where I couldn't take it anymore, I dialed it down a little bit. So with the chicharrones, sometimes Walmart, if I can say Walmart, these big
Sure.
box grocery stores have sometimes they have truck parking, and they allow us to not necessarily overnight, but stay a little bit to go do a little shopping. So I'll get the sour cream or the pre-prepared guacamole, pico de gallo. I also got some coconut oil. So I kind of mix all that together, and it makes an excellent dip for the chicharrones.
Nice.
Fat in addition to other kinds of fat. And Steven, the other trucker guy, hey Steven, I know you're listening, but no, he because I was posting some of these things on the Facebook, and then he'd come back with other ideas, because they have all kinds of gadgets that are 12 volt. I mean, you can cook your own meals within the truck and do all kinds of preparation stuff. So, I mean, I have a cooler, and some of these other dudes have refrigerators within their truck. I mean, they're not suffering. It's maximizing the space to your comfort level. You know, some people have big screen TVs and satellite and all that kind of stuff. So,
and how has the ketogenic thing worked for you? I mean, we haven't really talked about your results. How long you've been doing it, and what's happened?
Okay, so I've been doing it seriously since, let's see, this is September, so real serious since November, after Thanksgiving. It was after Christmas, because I indulged with the family during that time.
Yeah.
Only gained a few pounds, and because I've been doing just the real food, eating between a certain amount, between certain hours, like within an 8-hour window, and then fasting the other 16. And I respond really well to that. And so, but when I started getting really into, ketogenic, I was like, well, I don't have the measuring tools to see. So let me listen to my body, do it like they did back in the caveman days. And I almost immediately, about within 2 weeks, my mental clarity it's subjective, but my mental clarity has definitely improved, and I'm more sensitive to conversation too. Listening to my wife and not like going off. It's not a mental fog, and my emotionally, I'm even keeled. I mean, I don't go off the handle. Sometimes I do, but.
Those are really good signs that you're in ketosis. The mental clarity, the focus, the stability of moods. You don't need a meter to tell you you're in ketosis when you've got that kind of result.
Absolutely.
Right. And I enjoyed your last week's podcast for the protein, because it answered a few of my own questions, like how much protein do I actually need? Because a lot of the experts don't exactly agree as to how much. And so I'm just listening to my body. Hey, I'm craving fish today.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I'll do just enough. And if I feel like if I'm driving and I feel like I need to eat, I have to determine whether or not am I really hungry or am I thirsty. So I have a gallon of water that sits right next to me, and so I'll go ahead and take a swig of that, or the keto coffee. I have my own. In my cooler, I keep a thing of full fat cream and unsalted butter that I just drop into it and take it inside the. You can. I have a Keurig too, so.
All right,
nice.
Not suffering.
No.
And how much weight have you lost?
Let's see. I started this process at my greatest. I was between 222 to 230, and I weighed myself. Last week I was at 181.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, 175 between 175 and 181, and so I ditched the scale, because at my height and weight, or at that height, the scale becomes counterproductive if you're going to base your success on that.
Yeah.
So I bought some tight clothing, some T-shirts that I bought at the truck stops. When it says Virginia or.
Yeah. Well done, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Thank
awesome.
you. But I plan on getting some of the measurements, some of the measuring tools when I get back home to actually see if I actually am in ketosis. If so, by how much, and do the same for my wife as well, because she's on board with this, and so is my middle son. I have a 19-year-old too. He's in university.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, this is such an inspiring story, and anyone who's out there listening, how can they reach you if they want to send you a message?
I am publicly searchable on Facebook, and I don't read my emails as much.
And your name on Facebook is R Kevin Scharmen. And how do you spell your last name?
SCHARMEN.
And you can be found on our Facebook group.
Yes, I can.
Absolutely.
Yes, I can. I'm going to turn my wife on to you guys' Facebook, and whenever this podcast I wanted to say kudos to you, Carl, because you're dedicating the next 50 years to help people.
Yeah, thank you.
And well, for me, there's no greater accomplishment than saving a life.
I totally agree.
Yeah. And if you're doing that, and Richard's doing that, and you guys kind of beat me to the punch, because I was like, hey, I found this good thing, and then wanted to start a group and stuff like that. But I'll have to do it locally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, San Antonio has a diabetes rate that's real high, and so if I ever decide to become a nutritionist or something like that, I have a lot to work with. So
the world needs more of us than there are of us. So that's true. And when it comes to saving lives, I can't take credit for that. Richard and I didn't invent the ketogenic diet. We can only hint and tell people about our experiences, and people's bodies heal themselves. I give my liver credit for saving my life.
Yeah.
Kevin, it's been such a wonderful time spending with you, and what an amazing story in 4 parts. It's just fantastic.
Well, I hope I've given you enough material to work with, because I could keep going. Some of my stories are even true.
Kevin Scharmen, thanks very much.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Well, then I think that brings us to recipes.
So this is the bit that Kevin said really helps he and his wife out. I don't have a very valuable recipe today. I'm doing an extension of Kim Houghton's recipe from the Female Show.
Right.
And in that recipe, you might remember she made lemon curd with 4 egg yolks. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the meringues and I'm going to beat them up until they're stiff peaks. I'm going to add some cream of tartar. So I've got 4 egg whites left over from that recipe.
Yep.
And I add about a teaspoon of cream of tartar. And what that does is it helps the egg whites beat into very stiff peaks.
Yes.
And I'm going to start out originally with a bowl that I put in the fridge, and you got to make sure when you're beating egg whites not to get any fat in the bowl. So I put a bit of cling film over the top and I chill it down. I take those egg whites. I've got to make sure if there's any yolk in those eggs, you've got to pull it out with a spoon and get rid of it and all of the egg white around it, because you want to have no fat at all in it.
I usually end up tossing them and starting over.
Yeah, that sometimes happens. But this time when I made the curd, I was I made very certain that I had entirely whole yolks and did them one at a time into a bowl, so I could make sure of that. So I've got 4 egg whites. I've got a teaspoon of cream of tartar. I've got a chilled bowl, and I've got some beaters and I basically beat that until it stiff peaks. And I added a smidgen of pure sucralose powder. Now, a smidgen's actually an accurate measurement. I think it's 1/32. Yeah, it's actually an actual measurement. It's like something like 1/32 of a teaspoon. So
wow.
If you make cheese or you do anything to do with cultures where you're taking a small amount of spores and adding them to a recipe, you get these special spoons. But what you can do is you can just you can eyeball the very tip of a teaspoon into sucralose. But what you're trying to do is just sweeten it a little bit.
Yeah.
But you can do it without sweetener if you want. So What I did was I got a silicone muffin mold. that holds 12 mini muffins. And it's basically a small puck-sized, small discs about 1.5 inches in diameter. And I put that silicone mold with the egg white mixture in it in an oven at 120 Celsius, which is about 250 Fahrenheit. So it's a low temperature, and I put it in basically until I watched them until they went slightly brown on the outside, and then I knew they were ready. But it ended up being about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And so then I take them out and let them cool down on a bench, and then I put them in the freezer, and that's where they stay until I'm ready to use them. And
then you just top your lemon curd pies or whatever with them.
Absolutely.
And you've got lemon meringue pie.
On a bowl, I put one of these little meringues down on a bowl, and then I put a little dollop of the lemon curd on top of that, little nice tart, sweet lemon curd, and then maybe put a blueberry on top of that just for finesse. But so that's my recipe. It's an extension of Kim's recipe. It's sort of like it's taking egg to the next level.
You know what I love about today's recipes is that we're going all French.
Okay.
You got meringue, and I've got béarnaise sauce.
Oh, and I love a good béarnaise.
And maybe this is subconsciously in response to my comment about brie spread last week, for which I got crucified.
Yes, well, fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough. And just for the record, I was curious. It had no carbs. I wanted to try it. But I am a brie hound. I love full fat brie, triple cream, double cream, whatever it is. I spread it on bacon and use the bacon as crackers. Some of my favorite brie is a German mushroom brie, which I get at a local cheese shop in Old Saybrook, Connecticut called Fromage. So
you've established your cheese credentials.
I have established my cheese credentials. Please. No more hate mail. All right. So let's talk about béarnaise sauce. Béarnaise is related to hollandaise in that it's a very butter-rich, egg yolk-rich sauce. It's one of the 5 classic French sauces. And I may even go through all 5 of those throughout the next 5 shows. But we're starting with béarnaise. So béarnaise and steak are really a match made in heaven. But this sauce has a few other divine uses like over poached eggs or over roasted fish. Anything that you might think of a tartar sauce like rich sauce. And I say tartar sauce because that's the closest thing I can think of. It's very heavy in tarragon though. So
it's a tarragon based one, isn't it?
Yeah. All right. So this recipe is from Epicurious, which is a great app, website, just a great collection of recipes that are all rated. And this makes about 1 cup of béarnaise. Now, before I tell you how to make it, let me give you my favorite application on the ketogenic diet of béarnaise.
Sure.
A lot of people complain that they don't get enough fat, and they have a hard time when they're hungry finding fat bombs or fat things that they can eat to satiety. So especially when it comes to meat, a lot of people don't like fatty meat. They're conditioned to eating lean meats. Yeah. And of course, filet mignon, beef tenderloin is a very popular lean meat.
Sure.
It's very tender and it's not very fatty at all. So béarnaise is great for taking a little bite of filet mignon and dipping it in your béarnaise or just spooning it over your steak. All right, so this makes 1 cup. You take 1 tablespoon plus 2 sticks of unsalted butter and cut them into 1/2-inch cubes. And you need 3 tablespoons of minced shallots. You need some kosher salt and freshly ground black pepper, or you can use sea salt or pink salt. I don't care.
Yeah.
2 tablespoons of champagne vinegar or white wine vinegar. I haven't tried it with apple cider vinegar, but that might be my next test. 2 large egg yolks. 1 tablespoon or more of fresh lemon juice, and squeeze it yourself, kids. Don't get the lemon juice in a bottle.
No.
And then 1 tablespoon of finely chopped fresh tarragon. So you can probably see if you've ever made sauces before how this is going to work out. Yeah. But in case you can't, here's the recipe. You melt 1 tablespoon of butter in a small saucepan over medium heat. Mm-hmm. You add the shallots and a pinch of salt and pepper and stir that to coat them all up. Then you stir in the vinegar and you reduce the heat to medium-low and you cook it down until the vinegar is evaporated, which takes 3 to 4 minutes. Then you reduce the heat to low and continue cooking the shallots, stirring frequently until they're tender and translucent, caramelized, about 5 minutes longer. Transfer all that to a small bowl and let it completely cool. Now, you fill a blender with hot water to warm it and set it aside. This is just to warm up the blender.
Right.
And you melt the remaining butter, which is 1 cup or 2 sticks, in a small saucepan over medium heat until it's foamy. And you transfer that to a measuring cup. Now, you drain the blender, dry it well, so it should be nice and warm.
Yeah.
And you combine the egg yolks, the lemon juice, and a tablespoon of water in the warm, dry blender. You puree that until it's smooth. Now, you remove the lid insert, and with the blender running, slowly pour in the hot butter in a thin stream of droplets.
Yeah.
You want to discard the milk solids at the bottom of the measuring cup, and if you're really, really cool, you can make ghee, which is clarified butter first, and use that.
So it's really like a mayonnaise. You're making an emulsion now, aren't you?
You're making an emulsion, absolutely. So you continue blending until a smooth, creamy sauce forms about 2 or 3 minutes. You pour that sauce into a medium bowl. You stir in the shallots and the tarragon, and season to taste with salt, pepper, and more lemon juice if desired. There you go. Béarnaise sauce.
Nice.
And this, like I say, is just great on just about everything.
I've got to try it on fish. That sounds awesome, yeah.
Yeah. They say on fish, like a roasted fish or an oven roasted fish. I imagine it's great on salmon because a little acid and a little, herbaceousness like dill is always really good with fish and salmon. But this is tarragon. It's wonderful.
Sure.
By the way, tarragon also great on lobster. So this would work well with lobster. Also a lean meat and shrimp. And also really good on carrots, although I don't eat carrots anymore. But tarragon and carrots is a classic combination.
So one of the things for people who are growing their own herbs, and I highly recommend that because there's nothing better than having a herb garden as you're cooking and just remembering, I need some sage, and knowing exactly where it is and plucking it fresh out of the ground. But one thing about tarragon, there's 2 types of tarragon. There's Russian tarragon plants and French tarragon plants. And in Australia, we can get the Russian tarragon plants everywhere, but the flavour is not as intense as the French. So try and get the French plants if you can. If you're going to plant your own vegetable garden, that's one of the most difficult to find, in Australia at least, the French version of tarragon.
Wow. Good tip. All right, well, that's a show. Of course, we'd like to thank Kevin Scharmen.
Yeah, thanks, Kev.
And, of course, if you have anything you want to tell us, something we said wrong, something that you don't agree with, some more research that you've found to support or refute what we've said, send it by email to dudes@twoketodudes.com or post it on our website.
And you can follow us on Twitter @2ketodudes or on Instagram @2ketodudes. And of course, if you want to join our Facebook community, it's fb.2keto.com.
Of course, our blog is blog.2keto.com.
Sure.
Our recipe archive is recipes.2keto.com. And go to our blog and check out our posts. There's stuff there that not just Richard and I have posted, but the admins in our Facebook group as well. And if you like it, pin it on Pinterest, because that helps us out a lot.
Sure.
All right, man. Kevin, thanks. It's been a pleasure talking to you again.
Oh, yeah, you too. Thank you.
All right, Richard, that's a show. Keep calm and keto on.
Yeah, keep calm and keto on, Carl.
All right, and we'll see you next time on 2 Keto Dudes.